This is the VoiceOver Marketing Podcast, Episode 3. Hello and welcome to this episode of the VoiceOver Marketing Podcast. My name is John Melly, and this is the podcast dedicated to teaching in-depth and advanced marketing strategies for people in the voiceover and audio production professions. My goal is to help you make more money by showing you ways to leverage your time, charge more for your talents, and allow you to spend more time doing the things you want to do in your life. Hello, everyone. Greetings from Boston, Massachusetts, and welcome to the program. We have a fantastic guest on the program. His name is Greg Elwell, and Greg is a writer and thought leader who helps content marketers grow their business. I had a great conversation with Greg, and I know you're going to get a lot from it. We talk about being authentic with yourself and your clients to grow a business you actually enjoy. We also discuss treating yourself as your own customer, but not in the way you might initially think. There are some terrific nuggets in our conversation that I really think you're going to enjoy, so please stay tuned for that. But before we get started, this episode is sponsored by Vision Day, the one-day strategic planning day for your life. And this is really powerful. I did one of these a few years ago, and it has had a profound impact on my life and my business. You can find more information about Vision Day at visionday.com, and there's a link to that in the show notes as well. Well, a lot's happened since the last episode. First, I want to thank everyone for listening and for all your positive comments and feedback about the show. I also want to thank everyone for sharing the podcast link with their friends. The number of listeners keeps growing. We went from about 70 downloads in March for the first episode to well over 280 total downloads of the first and second episodes by the end of April. And I have you to thank for that. On a more serious note, I'd be remiss if I didn't acknowledge all the kind phone calls, emails, and text messages I received after the terrorist bombings at the Boston Marathon a couple of weeks ago. It has been very difficult, to say the least. I'm fortunate that none of my immediate friends and family were harmed, but as time goes on, we learn more about connections we have to people who were indeed directly affected. I have a friend and business associate of mine who knew Crystal Campbell, who was killed. And my sister had as one of her students many years ago the MBTA police officer who was wounded during the shootout. He's thankfully making a recovery. Finally, the shootout, and it's so bizarre to talk about this like this, but the law enforcement staging area happened just minutes from where I sit right now recording this podcast. It literally happened a stone's throw away from here. It's kind of surreal. It's weird even just talking about it, but we are healing. We are sad. But we have also united as a community. You know, it seems that all the petty differences have fallen away. And believe it or not, Boston drivers who are infamous for being Boston drivers have become more polite to one another. There's a real sense of community here. There always has been. Bostonians are very proud. A lot of that is manifested through our pride in our sports teams, but, you know, we're proud of being Boston, and there's a real sense of community here, but we're just more open about it now. And I don't want to belabor the point, but I did feel it was important to acknowledge what happened and to thank everyone who reached out to me. It meant an awful lot. If you would like to do something for those wounded or the families, I'd like to ask you to join me and consider making a donation to the fund that has been set up for them. It's called the One Fund Boston, and you can go directly to onefundboston.org. All the money raised will go directly to the survivors and the families of those killed. And as of this recording, it has raised more than $27 million in 2 weeks since the attacks, which is truly remarkable. There's a link to onefundboston.org in the show notes. Any amount is welcome, and I want to thank you in advance for your consideration. And with that, let's move on to the part of the program where we meet our special guest, Greg Elwell. Welcome back. My guest today on the VoiceOver Marketing Podcast is Mr. Greg Elwell. And Greg is a writer and thought leader helping content marketers build and take their online business to higher levels of influence and performance. Now, you might be wondering why I'm having Greg on the program today. And the reason is that regardless of whether you're writing or you're creating video or you're doing voiceover, we're creating content, whether or not it's a script that you've written or a script that you're performing for someone else, or if you're even putting together marketing materials for your business, you're creating content. So that's one of the reasons we have different folks from different industries on the program, is to expose you to a whole bunch of different stuff out there, and you can pull from it what you want. But let me tell you a little bit about Greg. He's the founder and principal of B2B Inbound, which is a top-rated certified HubSpot partner for content strategy and creation services. Greg's B2B Inbound blog is listed by HubSpot as one of the 39 fantastic inbound marketing blogs you ought to be reading. He's also been named to the list of 12 must-follow B2B marketers by Optify, which is a leading digital marketing software company. Greg's also the host of the B2B Inbound Expert Interviews podcast, where he's interviewed entrepreneurs, authors, and innovators like Mark Levy, John Lee Dumas, and Stu McLaren. His podcast, like his writing and consulting work, focuses on motivating, inspiring, and equipping others to do their best work ever, so that they can take their business to the next highest level. Now, before he started his marketing and consulting business in 2006, Greg was a marketing leader for more than 15 years in the wireless industry, with companies like Cellular One and Sprint, which was formerly Nextel Communications. Now, Greg believes that we're all endowed with a unique creative genius, and by turning pro and doing our work, the work not only becomes self-fulfilling, but it may very well change the lives of the people we touch for the better. Greg and his wife, Tricia, have 6 children and 17 grandchildren that they love and they love to spoil. And Greg is an avid reader, a runner, and an RVer, and he says those are the 3 R's that help make life more brilliant and fun. You know, Greg, I could go on with your accomplishments and all your interests and everything, but let's jump in. How are you? Welcome to the VoiceOver Marketing Podcast.
Hey, John, I'm great. Thanks for having me. It's an honor to be with you today, my friend.
I should let everybody know that how Greg and I met was through podcasting. Indirectly, Greg had contacted me some months back to see if I could help him out with the intro to his podcast, which is the B2B Inbound Expert Interviews podcast. And I'll certainly provide a link to that in the show notes. And you can talk more about that, Greg, as we go along. But I've done that for Greg. And one of the things that I do with people that are new into my world here is I provide them with a background story. And Greg, correct me if I'm wrong, but you liked my story, and actually Greg interviewed me on his podcast sometime, and we got to know each other, and we enjoyed our conversations, and I think we enjoy each other's company on the phone, Greg.
Absolutely. You know, it's really amazing, isn't it? I mean, how you meet people, you meet people online, you reach out, you help, and, it gets reciprocated, and you build relationships, and you wind up, helping each other out even more, and that's kind of what makes our world go around, doesn't it? And having these opportunities to share our experiences together and hopefully do some good.
Yeah, I think this is kind of an evolving theme for this podcast. The previous episode, I interviewed Derek Chappell, who is an attorney, but he's also a voiceover talent, and we met online via Twitter and through blogging. And so this whole internet, social media, and multiple media platforms that we're all engaging in really is pretty amazing when you think about how you can really reach out and touch some lives. And I think that's some of the things that you talk about with the work that you do by creating. So, Greg, paint a picture of what your business is about. Before we dive in on that, I just want to remind our listeners, we have all kinds of listeners on the program. We have people from all types of different businesses, but we have a concentration of folks in the voiceover and production industry. And one of the things that I want to ask people to do is just listen to what Greg does with an open mind and sort of see how what he's doing in his business and the content that he's creating, how that can apply to your voiceover and production business. So, Greg?
Yeah, thank you. So as you mentioned, John, I've been an entrepreneur for about going on 7 years now, I guess.
Okay.
And I got started in this because I was working with a company called Nextel, and Sprint bought them, and they moved the headquarters to a different location, and I didn't want to move, so I kind of got that entrepreneurial spark, I think, and it's like I was 54 years old at the time. And I thought, if now is not the time, when is? And my dad was an entrepreneur as well. He started up his own body shop, and I worked in his shop, and I saw what, that meant to him and his life. And I just kind of always had that inside of me that I wanted to do something for myself and be my own boss, right?
Yeah.
So I launched out into it, and I first started doing, I was really interested in the internet. Because at that time, and you think back to 2004, 2005, and the internet was really starting to kind of pick up steam in terms of being a marketing vehicle, if you will, or a channel for marketing. In fact, Nextel at the time was shifting a lot of dollars into the internet to be found and to engage with their audience. And I sat in with a bunch of meetings, marketing meetings, and listening about, how that was happening, and it just really gave me an interest in maybe pursuing that as a career as an entrepreneur. So I got involved. I started to teach myself how to develop websites using HTML and CSS and JavaScript and all that stuff. And I started designing websites for small businesses. And before long, I realized that it's not just enough to have a website and put content out there. You have to figure out how to draw people to those sites. So internet marketing began to get pretty big, and things like search engine optimization and different things like that. And then ultimately, of course, creating content. So after about 2 or 3 years, my business had just kind of evolved from doing web development to doing more. The term that's been coined now is inbound marketing.
Okay.
So instead of pushing information out there and trying to annoy people, right, by whether it's direct mail or telemarketing or, interruptive messages, inbound marketing seeks to draw people in based upon your content and how relevant and interesting it is to your target audience.
Okay.
And so this was just a real revelation for me and I think for many. And so I got involved with the inbound marketing methodology and strategy, so to speak, all centered around content. And about that time, I got interested in a company called HubSpot, which is out in Cambridge, Massachusetts. And they kind of coined the term inbound marketing, and they have developed a software, they call it an all-in-one software platform that helps businesses, small, medium, and large, create content and do the inbound marketing thing to attract their ideal audience. And so I started to work with customers that were on the HubSpot platform in order to help them work the tools, for one thing. They have keyword tools, there's performance tools, competitive tools, there's a blog tool, there's landing page tools, there's about 20-some different tools integrated into this one platform. But the key component is content. Without content, nothing works. Nobody's going to be interested. So I really, over the last, I would say, 2 years, I've really been focused on and specializing in creating content for my clients and helping them to create content that is going to appeal to their target audience, draw them in, generate some leads, and then eventually convert them from a lead to a customer.
Interesting. The thing that comes to my mind, listening to your story, it's sort of like Field of Dreams. Build it and they will come.
Not necessarily so, though, right?
Yeah, no, but so maybe you could speak to that a little bit. You're not just creating any old content. You're using strategies to create content that's relevant to a particular audience. How do you match that relevant content, and then how do you draw people to it?
Yeah. Well, first of all, I think, it's really helpful to understand that, the build it, they will come thing, it doesn't work.
Yeah.
It's just like HubSpot has this fabulous tool, this platform, if you will, but it's not a pill. It's not a silver bullet. You have to work it. It's just like the best analogy I can think of is, and it probably falls short, but it's the gym membership analogy, right?
Okay.
You could have a membership to the most fantastic gym in the world with all the machines, the programs and everything like that. But if you don't go and if you don't use those machines and you don't get involved and be active, it does you no good whatsoever.
Right.
So that's the first thing to realize, is that there's a lot of fantastic tools and systems and platforms and strategies and methodologies out there, but you have to understand how to use them. You have to use them, and you have to use them in a way that's going to be relevant to your target audience, and appealing to them. So one of the things that I do, I'll just give you an example. One of the services that I offer is blog article writing, ghost writing essentially for clients who don't have the skills to write. They have the ideas, and they have the topics, and they have the messages, but they just don't have the time or the skills or the resources to actually do the writing. So what I've done with them is I've put together a 7-module program, basically, that starts them out. Well, the first thing that we have to do, Module 1, is understanding your goals. What do you aspire to? Why do you want to blog? What's the purpose in it in the first place?
Mm-hmm.
What's your aspiration? And then we develop some goals. And the second thing is, who is your target audience? Who do you want to appeal to? And what are they like? So we develop a profile. We call it a persona. I call it a blogging persona as to who you want to reach. And then the third module goes into, such things as developing your content mission statement. It talks about who are you, what do you have to offer, what makes you unique, and that's so important in content marketing, is that you don't want to go out and try to copy everybody else, but you want to understand what is it that you have to offer that nobody else has, and that's going to be attracted to your target audience. So that's just kind of give you an idea as some of the foundation blocks or the building blocks, there we go,
yeah.
of content marketing and the kind of approach that you really want to have.
I want to back up a little bit because I want to direct people's attention to something that Greg said a moment ago, and that you go through this whole process of who do you want to attract. And I think there are a lot of folks in any business that if they've got a script and they're willing to pay people some money, or if I do some consulting work, or if they've got a check and they want to engage you, then that's okay. And that might not necessarily be the best business decision for you. I think by finding out who you want to attract, you're in a way kind of pre-selecting and finding people that you want to work with and attracting the kinds of clients that you want to have. Am I wrong?
Oh, you're right on.
Yeah.
Absolutely. And a lot of times, John, those people are not that different from you.
Mm-hmm.
I counsel a lot of my clients that they look at other businesses that are similarly situated to them, and they try to be like them. Maybe they try to produce the same kind of content that they produce, and those kinds of things. And that really doesn't work.
Yeah.
So you really have to look at what makes you unique and special, and that what you have that nobody else has. And so what's your message? You have to not only look at your audience, but you have to look at yourself. It has to come from within you. And I think, that really speaks to, I think, your audience, voice-over artists and those that are in the audio production field.
Mm-hmm.
Because to make it work for them to stand out in a very competitive field, I'm sure, is they have to kind of find their voice, their calling,
right.
Their unique value. We call it a unique selling proposition, or what's our unique value proposition.
Mm-hmm.
And so a lot of people really look, I think, too much at the audience first.
Mm-hmm.
I think what you have to do is, and a guy by the name of Mark Levy said this, and I interviewed him on one of my podcasts. He wrote a book called Accidental Genius. He said, forget your audience and look first to yourself. What is it that fascinates you? What is it that interests you? What is it that you have that you just have to get out there more than anything else? Because the chance that there's more people like you than you think might be different from you is very great.
Yeah.
You're not for everybody, but you're going to be for enough people as long as you understand who you are and how you can serve them.
Sure.
Does that make sense?
Absolutely, and I totally agree with it. And it allows people to be their authentic self, and it makes their business much more pleasurable. And
right.
Here's the thing, I'm not everybody's cup of tea, and that's fine. And it's kind of taken me a while to not be a total people pleaser for everyone. But, I have an audience, and let's say again?
Oh, I just said me too.
Yeah, and I think a lot of us are from that, and I think there's a lot of people. I think there's a lot of forces in our culture and in the media that tries to get everybody to think, and agree that absolutely everything is hunky dory. But we all come from our own experiences and our backgrounds and our life experience, and I think if we're authentic, then that's great. I'm fiscally conservative. I hate government waste and spending, and I put that in my writings and I inject it into my podcast like I just did.
And not everybody is going to agree with you.
No.
That's okay because, again, you're not for everybody, but you're for those. You want to attract people that have a similar worldview, so to speak, and that value what you value. I mean, that's where the resonancy is. Yeah. That's where you can be relevant because you can't be relevant to everybody. Can I tell you a quick story?
Sure.
Brad Keselowski, many will recognize that name. He was the 2012 NASCAR Cup champion, Sprint Cup champion for last year. NASCAR. He's a race car driver, right?
Yeah.
So just before the Daytona 500, he was interviewed by Erin Andrews. And so they kind of went into this thing about, he is, in order to be relevant, he says, it's important to be authentic. So Erin was asking him, why is it that you have this, I got to be different persona? And what he said was, I want to leave the sport better than when I found it. And to do that, we have to do things differently, right?
Yeah.
And Erin also shared that after the interview was all over, he came up to her and he said, so we're having these beauty shots. I guess that's when they, take all these shots for media, showcasing the drivers and their cars and all that. So they're going to have these beauty shots, right? And he says, so I want to know, Erin, what are all the other drivers doing and what are they going to be wearing? Because I want to be totally separate and different from anybody else.
Huh.
That's a pro. I mean, that's somebody who knows who his audience, who knows who he is, who he wants to be, and he wants to be this authentic person, right? He doesn't want to be like everybody else. He doesn't want to be a cookie cutter person,
right?
And I don't want to be that as a content marketing artist, and you don't want to be that as a voiceover artist. And hopefully the people that are listening will understand that as well, is that they've got to find their must. They've got to find their place, their authenticity, their unique genius, so to speak, and let that come out.
Yeah, no, I agree with you. And I think we've already said it. It's just be yourself. It doesn't matter if you agree with me or disagree with me or anything. I think what everybody really wants is respect for the other person's opinion and respect for the other person. And I think that's important. But I think it's also equally important when you're engaged in business that you want to attract a customer that you really like working with, because not everybody's a great customer for you and you're not a great vendor for everybody.
Oh, that's so true.
Yeah.
You can't please everybody, but you can please some. And those are the ones that you want to work with. And for everybody else that's out there that doesn't fit into that, that's okay.
Yeah.
Because there's other people for them.
I think Seth Godin writes about this quite a bit in his stuff.
He does.
Yeah.
Seth writes about this a lot. He's got the book that came out called The Icarus Deception, and it's really all about that. It's really about being yourself and seeking to find your audience that are sort of on the edges of, don't go for the mass, but go for those that are the misfits, so to speak, the ones that nobody else is really resonating with. So, and that all comes back to who you are and how you can relate to them in a very unique way that's relevant and authentic to them.
Sure.
Yeah.
I kind of want to shift gears a little bit and kind of go back to the beginning of the conversation where you talked about going from corporate America, not wanting to move and strike out on your own and have your own business and be your own boss. And we have a lot of folks in the listening audience out there that work another job and are interested in doing voiceover either part-time or wanting to take it full-time, and they get a little scared making that change. And I'm fortunate. I work full-time at a radio station, but I have my own voiceover and production company as well, so I am doing this full-time. But other folks are out there, they're pursuing a passion. Maybe they like what they're doing, but they want to jump into voiceover more, or they're in a career and they are thinking of adding voiceover to their portfolio of activities. Were you scared?
Oh, I was so scared. I had the dream job, first of all, at Nextel. This was the job of my career. This is what I wanted. I was a director of business marketing for the West region in Nextel, based in California.
Wow.
And I absolutely loved it. I had I had like 20 people on my team, and leadership is really what I love doing, and developing other people, and getting things done, and improving marketing results and all this stuff. And we were just having a blast. And I had the freedom to I created this thing called the Business Solution Forums, and we brought in customers and solution providers, and we educated people on what you could do with mobile data solutions on their phones and things like that. It was just fantastic. And I loved it. But and when that all came to an end, I mean, I really floundered for a while. I didn't know what to do. And I was, like I said, I was around 54 at the time. And I was going through these, they had this consulting group that worked with us, those that left the company, to help, get our resumes up in order and teach us job search skills and all this stuff. And for a while, I kind of looked at that. I tried to, I went on some interviews and things like that, but nothing really jived for me. Nothing really gelled. So then I just kind of, I did a bunch of home projects for a while, to be honest with you.
Okay.
I finished the deck. Everything around here was looking great, freshly painted, and finally my wife kind of said, well, what are you going to do?
Yeah.
And I said, well, I'm interested in this internet thing. And so what I did is, I was in a situation where I didn't have a job. But even if I had a job and I wanted to move to something else, this entrepreneurship thing and do a business venture, one of the things that you can do is you can educate yourself on the craft that you want to take up. And that for me was, I wanted to learn how to build websites. So I took a online course through a community college. I took a bunch of them. I probably took 8 or 10 of them, one after the other. And I got so excited in doing these. And so I was kind of doing that. At the same time, I was, kind of looking for a job, but my heart really wasn't in it. And then I just reached a point, John, where it's like, I can do this, and I can step out and I can try this. And I don't know if it's going to work, but I'm going to try. And so, I contacted some people and I said, hey, I'll build a website for you for free. I just want to see if I can do this. Will you work with me? And they said, sure.
Sure.
So one thing led to another, but yeah, I was scared. I was frightened, and and of course, this is the thing that Stephen Pressfield talks about in The War of Art and Turning Pro and things like that.
Mm-hmm.
When we have these aspirations of something that we really want to do, something that's going to improve our lives, kind of take us to the next level, live our dream kind of a thing. This thing called resistance, this invisible destructive force comes, and it fills us with all these self-doubts and fears that, oh, you shouldn't do that, you can't do that, you don't have the chops for that, you don't have the experience, you don't have this, you don't have that, and it just holds us down. But then he says, the key to overcoming resistance is don't wait for anybody else to pick you or to choose you or to tell you or to approve that you can do this. Pick yourself, basically. So he calls that turning pro. And turning pro is about choosing yourself and not waiting to be picked. And that's what I decided to do back then. I decided that I don't care if anybody else approves of this or thinks I can do it. I'm going to do it. I'm going to, turn pro. Well, you still get the resistance, and the fear and the self-doubts come in. But once you kind of turn the corner on that, then, you have a chance to succeed.
So where do you find your resistance? What triggers resistance in you? And I think we all have it. It's where we're procrastinating, I think. And
procrastinating is a big part of it, and a lot of times when procrastination comes up, it's because we already kind of know or have a thought of what we should be doing or what we could be doing or could become. And that self-doubt kind of creeps in, and maybe fear creeps in, and we're really not sure. And so we start to do other things like, you'll go and clean out the garage, anything but doing the work that you think you should be doing that you maybe could do. So and it's something you fight all the time. But once you get to that point, at least my experience has been, when you face the fear, and fear is an indicator. Pressfield talks about self-doubt and fear as being indicators, because they really kind of show us what it is we should and could be doing. And so the idea is to face the fear and go into it, and just begin, just start, just put one foot in front of the other.
Mm-hmm.
Like I said, I'm a writer, and you read that about my bio. Nobody called me a writer. I called myself a writer. So what I do is I sit down and write. And really interesting quote was in the book I want to share with you.
Sure.
It was from Somerset Maugham.
Okay.
And someone asked him, do you write on a schedule or do you wait for inspiration to come? And he said, I'm paraphrasing this, but he says, I only write when I'm inspired. Fortunately, that happens at 9 o'clock sharp every day when I sit down to write. He gets inspired.
Okay.
So the idea is, once we make a start, that's when the inspiration comes. That's when the magic happens. That's when we can work it out, so to speak, and practice our craft and make it better.
Excellent. So you went from a full-time job and a schedule, and you painted your house and built your deck and all that kind of stuff, which I think is probably the natural thing to do. You probably needed to do that on some level.
Therapeutic.
Yeah, and that's how I meant that comment. But then you started your business. And we have a lot of folks who do voiceover full-time. And one of the questions that I hear a lot, or comments that I see a lot in the forums, in the voiceover forums, is time management. And I can see where resistance and having your time to your own devices and not having to really report to somebody can be a bit of a challenge. How do you combat that?
Yeah, it's a great question. And, it's something I struggle with, and I'm still learning how to combat that.
And you've been doing this now for how many years now, Greg?
Well, since late 2005, early 2006.
Okay, so 7-8 years.
7-8 years.
And you're still working on it.
I'm still working on it.
And I don't mean that to be critical. I'm kind of just saying it's a never-ending thing, isn't it?
It is a battle. I mean, it's something that you learn, and you learn good habits, and a lot of times it does come down to habit. And here's something more recently that I've come to realize, and I got this from somebody else, but it was the idea that I am my first customer. So I am my first client of the day. And
okay.
If I don't take care of myself, I can't help anybody else.
Wow, that's a great writer downer. You are your first customer. So what do you do? What do you do to take care of yourself as your first customer?
Well,
I think this is a really key point.
It's been key for me, and I've been doing this for years. In fact, I'll just mention this, that I did a podcast earlier today with Andy Traub. Andy has written a book on Amazon. It's available on Amazon called Early to Rise.
Okay,
and it's all about what I've kind of said is being your first customer, taking care of yourself first, getting up earlier in the day perhaps, when maybe even before the sun rises, or whatever time you can kind of carve out. But it tends to work best in the mornings because that's when we're our freshest, that's when the creative juices are flowing, that's when our mind is still and things like that. So what I do is I get up at 5 o'clock every morning.
Okay.
Sometimes 5:30, sometimes I'll sleep in on the weekends a little bit. Sometimes I get up earlier at 4:30. And I don't even set an alarm clock, but I get up at 5 o'clock and I'm my first customer of the day, and I sit down. The house is quiet, my wife's asleep, the dogs, I let them out, they come in, I have my coffee, and I do some reading. And my pattern is I'll start with the Bible, and I'll have some prayer, and then I'll kind of work into a business book, something I'm really interested in reading, something that's going to help improve or give me thoughts and ideas and kind of support where I'm headed. And then I'll take a look, and I'll look at blogs that I read that are important to me, and the bloggers that I follow and things like that. And then I kind of take all that. And so this is about an hour or so into this, and then I'll check in on social media. And I don't spend all day on social media because social media can be a distraction. Mm-hmm. In fact, Pressfield said, the amateur tweets, the pro works. I mean, you can just really get wrapped up into social media. You could do it all day. And there was a period of time, like 4 years ago, when I was on Twitter all day long, in and out of Twitter and things like that.
Okay.
And it just became a distraction. So anyways, so what I do is the things that I think about that morning, the things that I've read, the things that interest me, that have fascinated me, that I want to share with others, I will load them into social media. And by loading, I mean I use an app called Buffer app.
Oh, I've heard of that.
It's a great app, John. You should get it.
Okay.
And what it does is you can load in as many, links and tweets or posts or whatever you want into it, and it will put it into like a time slot and will send it out on whatever schedule you have set up. And so you don't even have to be there. You don't have to be present. You don't have to be doing this, throughout the day. It'll do it for you. And then all you have to do is, kind of check into it, every now and then throughout the day. And if somebody responds to a tweet, then you can, you'll know that, and you can go in and respond in kind. So that's kind of my routine. And then after I do that, notice I haven't said I've checked email yet.
Yeah.
I used to check email first thing in the day. I get my iPhone, look at my email, who wants to talk to me?
Mm-hmm.
And rarely anybody does, but we have this need, I guess, to be wanted or to be talked to, and we want, for self-worth or whatever, and we check our email. And I don't even check email. In fact, I haven't even checked it today yet. I haven't really had a time because I've been busy. But normally I check email like maybe around 10 o'clock in the morning. Then
I wrote a blog post about that very topic.
Did you?
Yeah.
I got to read that.
Yeah, it was a while ago. And actually, it was something that was very well responded to. And I try not to check my email until afternoon because I learned this a while ago. Because when you check your email and start responding, you're working on other people's agendas rather than yours.
Yep. Yeah, and that's exactly the opposite of what I'm learning to do is, I need to be my first client of the day and my first customer.
Yeah.
And so then what I do is then I go into what I call my creative time. And that's, for me, that's writing. For you, it might be doing voiceover work or voice acting work or something like that.
Mm-hmm.
So I go into my writing mode and from, about 7 o'clock in the morning to 9, maybe even the whole morning, it kind of depends on how it flows, is I'll go into my writing and my creative time. And sometimes that means, I'm creating notes for a podcast or something like that I've got coming up or doing some research. But it's my time. It's time for me to be a creator instead of reacting to everything else that's happening. And I think that's so important. I think for anybody that's trying to make it as an entrepreneur, you've got to spend that time for yourself, and you've got to create. You've got to be an initiator and not a reactor to things, because we need to hear from you. We need to know what you think. We need to know what your message is. And if all you're doing is sharing everybody else's message and being on social media all the time and consuming all these blogs and books all the time, you're not creating anything.
That's really, really, I love this. This is a big takeaway for me for you framed it in a great way. Be your own customer first, or you be your first customer.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Right. I don't remember exactly where I got that, but I heard that and the light bulb just went off.
No, that's really great.
It was one of those things like, okay, that's got to happen. I got to make some changes. That's got to be the way I'm going to operate.
And has it worked for you?
What's that?
What kind of an impact has that had for your business?
Oh, I tell you, it's I don't know if you can even really measure it. It's meant so much for me, and I have seen that because of the fact that I'm putting myself out there more, and I think there's something about that. I think that Pat Flynn, who I love and follow, he's got the Smart Passive Income podcast and
he's great.
blog, and he talks about be everywhere, and this concept of putting yourself out there and good things will happen.
Mm-hmm.
And I've just seen like a steady rise in the interest that I've generated in an audience that is interested in hearing from me and perhaps me doing work for them. It's just increased.
That's great. Yeah. So have you finished the part of the day that you're your first customer, or are you still your own customer for a while?
I'm your customer right now.
Oh, yeah. No, I meant in terms of your day. You said you worked up till around 9 o'clock or so as your creative time. What happens then?
Then it's client work time.
Okay.
And so, once I finish my time, then I go into my client work. I check some email. But generally I get into my client work. And one of the things that I do in the morning, too, and this is so important, is I set my own schedule. I take control of my schedule. So when I'm having that first couple of hours in the morning, one of the things I'm doing is I'm looking at what do I need to get done today? Who do I need to serve or help or what client work do I need to do today? And prioritize that. There's a great book by Leo Babauta called The Power of Less. And I read that book last year on vacation, and it really talks about, I think you mentioned this earlier, John, about eliminating certain things and focusing on the things that are really important. In The Power Less, that really talks about, so how to prioritize your day and don't try to do too much. But what he says is to have, he calls them MITs, most important tasks. And he figures that about all we can really accomplish in any one day are three important things. So I'm not really good at this, but I try to prioritize. What are the three most important things that I've got to get done today? And then the other thing is start with your hardest thing first.
Yep.
Because usually, you're more energetic, you're more, focused and things like that, and save the easier stuff till later when you can just kind of coast through it then. But do your most difficult things first.
Interesting.
Interesting. Yeah.
That's great. I have to be mindful of the clock, but this has been a lot of great information. Do you have any other tips or suggestions that you can give to folks?
Just start. Even if your job, maybe, or you have a career or whatever, and you're working and it's not what you really want to do, find some time, carve out some time in the margins of your life, and maybe there's some things that you need to eliminate and give up. Maybe TV is one of them. I love TV. My wife and I, we love to sit down in the evenings and watch TV. But think of this trade-off between what you're consuming and what you could be creating, what you could be building for the future, for your future.
It's so true.
And I once read I heard about this one designer who started a business off of side projects. He just, in fact, if anybody goes to Tattly.com, Tattly.com, that was a site that they sell temporary tattoos there. And the whole thing started by just kind of a whim in a side project of, wouldn't it be nice if we got some designers together and we just designed some tattoos and see what became of it? And one thing led to another. And now they've got this business online where they're selling these, they call them designy temporary tattoos. And it started as a side project. So, start where you have to, start where you can, and just, do the best you can and see what happens.
That's fantastic. That is so funny. Temporary tattoos. The more I talk to people and learn about all kinds of different businesses that are out there, it always amazes me. And I guess that kind of brings us back full circle to being authentic and doing what you want to do and being who you are and attracting the type of customers you want. There are people out there who want temporary tattoos, so there's a business.
Sometimes you never know what people want.
That's amazing.
And I always just say, just be true to yourself. Look to yourself first. What is it that fascinates and interests you? What's got your attention? And get that out there. Seth Godin does this a lot too. Someone asked him, they thought that because he's such a prolific writer, he writes a blog every day. He does all 14, 15 books or whatever. And what's the method to your madness, Seth? Are all these kind of connected and hooked together? And do you have some kind of a systematic way that you go about and planning this writing and things like that? He goes, no, I just notice things and I write about them. So what is it that you notice that maybe nobody else has? What's your unique view? And create something around that and get that out there, because that's probably the thing that somebody else needs to hear or see or experience from you.
Interesting. Greg, this has been fantastic. I've enjoyed it. Yeah, I really appreciate the conversation and you carving some time out of your schedule to be on the program. If people are interested in learning more, what are the best ways for people to get in touch with you? And I will put this in the show notes as well, but if for folks in their car listening to the podcast or running, what's your contact info?
Yeah, thanks. I'm at b2binbound.com.
And that's B and then the numeral 2 and then the letter B again, correct?
You got it,
okay.
Inbound.com. And I'm also on Twitter at Greg Elwell, and it's GregelWell.
Excellent.
Yep.
Well, Greg, thank you. This has been great. I have so many takeaways from this, and I'm sure our listeners do too. What can I say? Thanks again for being on the program. It was wonderful.
Hey, I've really enjoyed it, John. I just really like talking to you and appreciate fellowship and our relationship, and I look forward to continuing.
I'm sure we will. Well, that's it for this episode of the Voiceover Marketing Podcast. If you like this podcast and you thought we had some good thoughts to share with you, please subscribe to it at www.voiceovermarketingpodcast.com so you'll get notices of new episodes, and please share it with your friends and colleagues in the voiceover world. Also, it'd be a huge help if you'd like this podcast and rate it on iTunes to help keep it near the top of the list. Also, feel free to share your comments and questions about this episode and topics you'd like explored in future episodes at voiceovermarketingpodcast.com. Also, if you'd like more information on coaching and mastermind group opportunities where we focus on growing your business, feel free to drop me a line at my cyber assistant's email address at mike@johnmelly.com. Thanks for listening. And now go out there and share your voice with the world.